SDPB brings South Dakotans together, telling the stories that unite small towns, big ideas, and the people who make our state shine. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jim Terwilliger. I'm calling the State Board of Internal Control meeting to order. Today's meeting is being broadcast live and will also be archived on the Boards and Commissions portal at boardsandcommissions.sd.gov. It can also be accessed through the OpenSD website. Please, if you're speaking, speak into the microphones. Make sure your microphone is turned on. And if you're not speaking, please make sure you mute your line until you wish to speak. If you wish to receive email notifications of meetings and other information concerning the Board of Internal Control, please sign up at boardsandcommissions.sd.gov. And with that, I will ask Allie to do a roll call.
Beck. Here. Forney.
Here.
Yost.
Here.
Satgast.
Here.
Tidbell Zeltinger.
Here.
Terwilliger.
Here.
Quorum is present.
With that, we will move on. Oh, I should mention before we continue move on. Chris Peterson's term he's termed out of the Board of Internal Control, so we're in the process of filling that spot, and so we expect that that'll be done here in the before our next meeting. And also just take the opportunity to really appreciate Chris's service on the board. Did a great job. He was, I think, a couple of terms on the board and was always asking questions and did a really good job, and so we appreciate his service. With that, let's move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the meeting agenda. Did anyone have any changes to the agenda? And if not, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Our agenda is approved. With that, we will move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Our last meeting was on March 25th, and the meeting minutes have been provided. Did anybody have any changes to the meeting minutes?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was excused absent excused.
For the March 25th meeting?
Yes, instead of present.
Okay. Can we make that change to the meeting minutes?
Yep, we'll get that noted.
Thank you for catching that. Okay, are there any other changes to the minutes? Okay, I would ask for a motion to approve with that minor change.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes with that adjustment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, our minutes have been adopted. Okay, with that, we will move on to agenda item number 5. We'll start with 5A. We have a couple of subrecipient audit notifications from Department of Legislative Audit. We will start off with West River Transit Authority. And if there are any questions or concerns, we'll address those after each one. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir. My name is Jess Marlowe. I'm with the Office of Air, Rail, and Transit, and here to discuss the audit findings for West River Transit Authority, DBA Prairie Hills Transit and Spearfish. During their last audit, there was one finding, a material weakness, internal control. They had 3 instances where there was a lack of review or approval over payroll. Prairie Hills has submitted a action plan to ensure that the executive director or the associate director will now review all payroll records and sign off before the payroll is processed. Our management decision concurred with that, and we will be following up with them in September at an on-site program review to review their entire operation as well as their financial management.
Okay, do we have any questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate you coming before the board.
Thank you.
Next, we have Youth and Family Services, and we have Department of Education.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Cody Stosser, Director of Finance Management for the Department of Education. I have Alan Harstead here with me. He's the Director of Child and Adult Nutrition Services. This finding is kind of in his area here. The finding is related to the Child and Adult Food Care Program, or CACFP. As you see on the finding, when auditors go in, they do a sample size of the program, whatnot. And in this sample, they were checking on the snack program, or part of the child care food program that where they offer snacks in the afternoon, or morning snacks, I believe. And when they do that sample size, they take so many. Just for a little context on this, the Youth and Family Services is a very large agency with us in the program. In the fiscal year, or October 2024, September 2025 period, they served 26,000 snacks. So when the sample size came in of looking at 89 snacks, it's a very small number of sample size there, but they did find an instance where the claiming and what they claimed on them was not correct, and that that difference of 20 snacks could have been multiple things. They could have mistyped on their keypad or something, their computer system. They're relatively close on the keypad or whatnot. But for the corrective action plan, they're taking an enhanced process to doing their reimbursement claims, and they should be anyway. They make sure those are correct. But with all the meals they're serving there, they're also serving 42,000 breakfasts, 50,000 lunches. So just the snack program here got a ding on them, and that could be a variety of reasons. So the snack value came out to $24. Is it a big number? No, but we do take this seriously because we get Child and Adult Nutrition Services involved. This could be part of like a risk assessment when we're looking at those, that, hey, this could up your review timeline. So I'm gonna probably have Alan jump in here, just give you a little more context on this program, since most of you probably don't understand what it actually does. So I'll let Alan jump in.
Mr. Chair, Alan Harstead, Division Director, Child and Adult Nutrition Services, Department of Education. So Cody outlined it very well, but our CACFP program gets, provides reimbursement to, this is a little far away, sorry, provides reimbursement to child care sponsoring organizations who are, feeding students across the state. Most of our child care places don't have like the formal cafeteria you'd see in a school district, and so they rely on, you know, the attendance forms and then communicating that over to the kitchen and getting the meals prepped, and then they oftentimes will do all their food service in the classroom. And so that that process of the attendance form not being completely legible for the snack, and then that getting over to the reimbursement was where this failed. And so, like Cody said, they have enhanced that oversight, as well as tweaked the form a little bit to make sure that there's no issues with transposing or legibility, I guess, in this case. So. Yeah, we do reviews of all of our sponsoring agencies a minimum of every 3 years. We do follow-up reviews as necessary, and so this is something that, like Cody said, we definitely take seriously if it comes up on review as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions? All right. Appreciate coming from in front of the board this morning. Okay, with that, we're going to continue on agenda item number 5. GOAC update is 5B. I don't believe there's been any GOAC meetings, Government Operations and Audit Committee meetings, since we last met. However, the next GOAC meeting is actually tomorrow, and Allie and myself will be in front of the Government Operations and Audit Committee to provide our annual update. That's of our annual work plan and everything that's going on as it relates to the Board of Internal Control. So we look forward to doing that tomorrow, and we will report back at next meeting on how that goes. With that, we'll move on to 5C. We are lucky to have Auditor General Russ Olson and his team here to go through and visit about the single audit findings discussion with the Department of Legislative Audit. So, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, excuse me, Russell Olson, Auditor General with Legislative Audit. Appreciate the opportunity to, come and brief the board a little bit. Again, talking about our single audit finding discussion. I'm not going to sit and go through every one of the findings today. I'm just going to hit up some of the high points. Again, Legislative Audit is tasked with doing the single audit of the state of South Dakota. We have basically completed that and issued it on time. The deadline for that was March 31st, and we did get it issued at that time. We appreciate all the cooperation from all of the state agencies in that process. I know we put a lot on you guys, and you guys always step up and help us the best that you can. So we certainly appreciate all of your help in getting that process done. The audit, we basically issued an unmodified opinion on the state of South Dakota's financial statements. And again, that's the best that you can get from that standpoint. So kudos to the people, putting all those reports together. We really appreciate that. We always basically want to come in front and discuss the findings that we have. It's a normal process in an audit for there to be findings. When we basically receive or testing things and we find issues, we want to let, first and foremost, the taxpayers of South Dakota know. Second, we want to let the agencies know. And third, we want to let you guys know. You guys are the Board of Internal Control. One of the pleasant things that we've had the opportunity to do is to work with Allie and her staff. I've looked at the process that has taken place in the Board of Internal Control and the whole internal control procedure that has been put in place. It's a tremendous thing that you guys have done and that the state of South Dakota has done. It benefits us, it benefits the taxpayers, and it benefits you guys. So we certainly appreciate everything that you guys have done for that. We've seen continual improvement. One of the things with Allie and her staff when they're doing this, they're going through a very detailed process that is similar to what is done in every audit, a risk assessment. You go through and you assess the risk of certain things happening. And so a lot of those things benefit each other. It's something that we certainly have appreciated everything and the cooperation that we've had with the staff. As it stands, basically for FY25 single audit, we basically had a total of 18 findings. Now, some of those findings are related to some of the outside agencies on reports that are done by outside CPA firms. We had 8 material weaknesses, 9 significant deficiencies, and 1 non-compliance issue. Again, from an audit standpoint, a material weakness is, again, the highest level, or the one that we as auditors want you as boards and commissions to basically take the most notice of. That's the highest level from a finding standpoint. Significant deficiencies, again, are still very important, just in a lesser degree, but we still feel it's important that the board and the taxpayers know. Non-compliance is, again, something that's required that we report based on auditing standards. A lot of the findings deal with federal grants. The federal government has a very specific process that they require every auditor to follow. And it's not just us, it's every audit. We all follow the same standards. So when an IPA or when a certified public accountant or a firm is doing the audit, they're following the same standards we follow. So we all follow that set of standards, generally accepted government auditing standards. So it basically gives us consistency from that standpoint. Based on looking at the findings, again, we had some that dealt with financial, the majority dealt with federal compliance. Again, I'm not going to sit and go through every one of them. I know there was a package that was put together that was shared with you, from that standpoint. I would rather address it from that standpoint. One thing I do want to point out, I have 2 of my seasoned audit staff, my 2 audit managers, Lisa Schofield and Mike Kogelman, our state audit managers. They're the real intelligence behind this, a tremendous amount of expertise and experience in the audit world. So from that, excuse me, from that standpoint, I will turn it to you to see if you have any specific ones that you may have questions about, or if there's something else that you would like me to address.
Thank you, Auditor General. Questions on anything related to, go ahead, Kelly.
Mine's more just of a general question. You have commented, excuse me, you've seen improvements over the years. We had 18 findings this year with 1 material weakness. Do you recall last year what that total was and the breakdown with material weakness versus noncompliance?
Mr. Chair, again, maybe I misquoted a little bit. Basically, where we were at in 25 was we had 8 material weaknesses, 9 significant deficiencies, 1 noncompliance. Last year, we were at 7 material weaknesses, 6 significant deficiencies, and 2 noncompliance. So there was a few more. Now, one of the things that's always going to fluctuate too is from the standpoint of which federal grants we're auditing. I do also want to, I guess, make sure that I point out, there's a few comments in there that deal with Department of Social Services and Department of Human Services. And again, we have to understand those 2 agencies handle a tremendous amount of federal grants. Very detailed, very federally regulated processes. So that's normal. I mean, there isn't anything that overly concerned me tremendously from that standpoint. So the findings we're going to have is going to vary based on the grants that we audit. Now, again, Department of Transportation is another one that handles a tremendous amount of federal grants. So those are the ones that, based on the federal standards and how we evaluate findings, that again is set in standards. How you evaluate a standard or a finding as to being a material weakness, significant deficiency, or non-compliant, that is, again, regulated, and every audit firm should be following the same procedure. There can be professional judgment in certain cases, but again, one of the things we always look to from an auditing standpoint is consistency. We try to treat everybody consistently, fairly, and nonpartisan.
If I could just, I think it's at the very end of the report, it summarizes prior findings and the results of those findings. And it appears to me that the majority of the prior issues have really been addressed, and those that weren't necessarily addressed were because they were caught right at the tail end maybe of a fiscal year and things hadn't quite been implemented yet. Would you agree that we're in good standing for all of the prior findings? And so that would maybe, I feel like I'm leading the witness, maybe lean into some of the comfort level that you have with the audit?
Certainly. Mr. Chair? Yes, certainly, it is part of the process that we do on an ongoing basis. When we issue a finding, the next audit that we come to, we have to follow up on that. So we have to say, did the entity correct it? Did they do what they were supposed to? The state of South Dakota, in most all cases when we deal with these, we have always had great cooperation in resolving these findings. That's one of the things that I appreciate the most from that standpoint is the findings that we issue are taken to heart and understood, and the corrections are put in place. So we certainly appreciate that from every standpoint. And again, your point to sometimes there's repeat findings, yes, that it does happen at sometimes, and timing can be an issue. With the process taking a while, we audit the year that's passed, and we find something that's going on, you might not have time to fix it before we come to do the next audit. So there is certain times we try to, in our findings, basically bring that up to make sure that that is pointed out, that they are making it. And we try to give credit to agencies when they respond of what they've done. If they have already made steps to do it. Another part of the process is every agency gets to issue a corrective action saying, this is what we're going to do to fix this. From that standpoint. That again is one of those things where we tell them, that's where you can say, you can tell the taxpayers, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do to fix this. And that's, again, a great tool.
I have a question. There's been a lot of different things in the news as it relates to, other states and how some of these federal funds are handled. Our neighbors to the east of us have had some issues, if you will. Do you have any, when you guys go through and, do your sample size and your testing and all those types of things, as it relates to, some of those are to try to identify fraud and different things that have gone on. I mean, can you comment about if any of that guidance has changed when that comes down through the feds, or is that constantly evolving? And then how do you adapt to that? And, can we have a role in that as well? Does that make sense?
Certainly from the standpoint of, anything that takes place in the other states is something that we always we keep ourselves abreast of. If there's an issue or a problem that's happening in another state, first thing I want to know is, okay, is that happening here? Because if it is, we want to get it taken care of right away. So, that's something we do monitor and basically look at from that standpoint. Now, the federal government side of it, yes, there are ongoing changes that come out of the federal government all the time that deal with this, and specifically dealing with the fraud issues that they've came about. And so some of the difficult part is it takes time. They have to go through and basically really analyze the programs, analyze the situations to find out what's the core problem, what caused this issue, and what can we do to prevent it. And then they come out with guidance. Again, that's part of a compliance supplement, which from a federal grant standpoint, they issue a compliance supplement, which is what we audit by. That is telling us, the federal government's telling us, these are the things that we want you to look at. There will be significant changes that will take place, I would say, in the near future that deals with that. It's always an after the fact kind of thing. Again, from our standpoint, one of the things our staff, I tried, we have discussions amongst our staff all the time, and it's always awareness. We always want to be aware of what's going on, and we want to talk, communicate. And we ask the same of you guys and your agencies. If you're seeing something, if you question something, call us. I want to know, I've told this to many, many people when it deals with fraud and other things that goes on. I would much rather prevent fraud than detect fraud. Prevention is cheaper, easier, better for all people involved, including the taxpayers. So that's big, and that's what internal controls are about, is putting something in place that prevents these things. So when we're seeing issues in other states, we look at those, we basically analyze them and say, okay, do we have that issue? If we do, we want to get it fixed. And we certainly will let you know if we do.
Any other questions? One last thing, in terms of, the relationship that you have with Ally and Carly, and is there anything else that we can do? We're all dealing with taxpayer funds and making sure that we have a good, solid system to protect those funds. to make sure that we're, doing right by the taxpayer, number one, and we're conducting our business as it should be. Is there anything else that you need from us or Ally in terms of how we can continue to improve? Because I think you used that word when you were visiting. I see this as a continuous improving process. We're never going to get to the end and say, hey, we're done and everything is great, because I think everything is continuously evolving in this world that we live in. And so is there anything else that we can do to make it better?
I certainly appreciate one of the comments you just made there, from the standpoint of the ever-evolving nature. And again, there is never an end from our standpoint. Things, as soon as you think you've got it figured out, somebody comes up with a new way of doing it. And so it's continually changing, continually revamping into new things. The one thing that you guys have done very well, and that I want to continue, and that's communication. When you see issues, don't hesitate to let us know. We would just as soon hear about it immediately rather than wait and find out in an audit. And so communication, let's keep that communication channel open. Keep us informed. We'll do the same with you when we run into things. The other thing I have talked a little bit with Ally is trying to get your staff and our staff to get together just to sit down and have a discussion. Not a training necessarily or anything, just talk. Again, I think opening that door is always great. We're there if you need help. Hopefully you guys are there if we need help.
One more question. Thank you. Would it ever be reasonable to expect that we would never have any audit findings in the single audit?
It would be great. We would love it. The mere fact that with the changing dynamics that happen, it's difficult. It really is. But there's certainly a possibility from that standpoint. I look at a lot of different states, and I look at their state audits as I do them. South Dakota does a good job. And, one of the things that was brought up in the news the other day was the error rate for our SNAP program. I mean, phenomenal. And that's when I go to my national meetings, I talk to other people, they go, what are you doing? It's people. It's good people. It's good communication. And we got to keep that going, from that standpoint. I hear a lot of times they'll say, well, you're a small state, so you can do that. And I said, no, we got really good, honest people. We really do. And I'm not saying that the others don't. It's just everybody takes their job very seriously, and I appreciate that.
Are you familiar with any other state that has not gotten any audit findings in their single audit?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying I didn't, but not that I know off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot a little bit. Very good. If there are no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Auditor General, for coming in. Appreciate it. We will move on. Okay, Ally, I am going to turn it over to Ally now. We are on agenda item number 6 with the Internal Control Quarterly Report, and we'll start off with statewide.
Great. So our internal control framework emphasizes ongoing monitoring, testing, and reporting of control performance as part of our first line activities. And to date, our framework has been implemented at 28 state agencies. We have 1 additional agency currently onboarding, and then we just recently identified 1 more that is preparing to onboard. So each agency has documented their objectives, risks, and controls, which we review periodically or at least on an annual basis, to promote accountability, continuous improvement, and adapting to those emerging or changing risks. Once onboarded, agencies are required to attest semi-annually to all of their controls addressing high and critical risks. So this process ensures that controls are not only documented, but they're actively implemented and operating as they're intended. So to illustrate the scale of this effort, this period we had 2,670 control attestation questionnaires that went out to 548 control owners statewide. And that resulted in a 98.4% completion rate, which is excellent. And I would really like to extend my appreciation to all of our agency internal control officers and the control owners for getting those attestations done timely. So this slide illustrates an overview of our state internal control results. Risk assessments are aligned to agency objectives to help us identify both department-wide and program-specific risks. And so you'll see to date, we have identified 14,035 risks. That's a net increase of 1,382 risks from last period. Those additions come from the annual review process that we went through, as well as the onboarding of the governor's office from last time. Risks are evaluated based on the likelihood and impact, and we prioritize those as either a low, medium, high, or critical risks. You'll see high and critical risks totaled 2,763, representing about 20% of all of our identified risks. We require that controls be documented for any risk that gets a high or critical rating, and to date we've identified 3,779 controls. And you'll see during this reporting period, we did identify 175 control issues or control failures through that attestation process. I know that number might appear high or concerning, but I just want to reiterate that the goal of this attestation cycle is not perfection. We want to kind of, what we alluded to with legislative audit previously, continuous improvement. We want to identify and address issues or control gaps before they escalate into more significant impacts. And so early detection supports proactive risk management and demonstrates that all of our agencies are actively evaluating whether their controls are functioning as intended. When we identify control issues, control owners provide context with remediation actions and what they plan to do to resolve that failure and take care of that before the next period. Each issue was reviewed with us and the agency internal control officers, and we categorize this as just a one-time exception or maybe something we need to dig into and implement additional procedures for. We will have agency level reports to provide additional detail on those remediation actions or the action they plan to take. We'll start with Morgan Greeley, who will report on the 3 bureaus for us this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Morgan Greeley. I am the director of the Executive Management Finance Office in BFM, where I serve as the finance officer and internal control officer for all 3 bureaus. The first agency to report on is the Bureau of Finance and Management. BFM was the first agency to document their controls and risks back in 2018. Over the last year, BFM has completed their annual review, which you can see reflected in the report provided. Since this review, BFM's documented risks have increased from 137 to 371. Of BFM's 371 risks, 18.1% are high to critical priority. This is comparable to the statewide average of approximately 20%. To help mitigate our risks, BFM has 95 documented controls. During this reporting period, BFM completed 100% control owner self-assessments on time, and our team noted no issues in controls. For the annual review, the budget analysis and state economist team are still completing the process. Once that is complete, risk numbers will increase additionally for BFM. Over the next year, we'll also continue to focus on control documentation. For example, the Executive Management Finance Office is prioritizing establishing standard documentation on key processes to assist in planning as we have tenured employees approaching potential retirement. The next agency to report on is the Bureau of Human Resources and Administration. BHRA completed their framework implementation in 2025, and this is their second reporting cycle. BHRA has 798 documented risks with 19.4% in the high to critical priority. To help mitigate risks, BHRA has 205 documented controls. During this reporting period, BHRA completed 90.5% of their control owner self-assessments on time and noted 46 issues and controls. Of the 46 issues, 18 are due to attestations not being completed. Now that BHRA has a year under their belt, we will work towards addressing gaps and updating risks appropriately. The final agency to report on is the Bureau of Information and Technology. BIT has 513 documented risks with 30% in the high to critical priority. As the state's IT agency, BIT supports many systems and services that naturally involve higher levels of risk and justifies why their percentage of documented risks is higher than the statewide average. To help mitigate risks, BIT has 264 documented controls. During the reporting period, BIT completed 91.1% of control owner self-assessments on time, and the team noted 43 issues in our controls. Over the coming months, BIT will work with Ally and Carly to drill into repeat control failures and to identify appropriate next steps. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
On BFMs, did I look at that? 234 more risks reported from last quarter to this. Did you guys do a review? And is it customary to have that many additional risks in an agency that size for a review? I'm a little concerned from our standpoint what our number might grow to.
Yeah, I would say that there's no set number of identified risks. I would say, like Morgan said, we had the additional risks identified in 2018. A lot has changed since then. And so I think we just identified a lot more items and took things, now that all other state agencies have onboarded, we can kind of do some risk sharing and say, oh, these guys identified this risk, maybe we should consider that as well. So some of that happened, but I would say as we've done these annual RCM reviews, that's been a common theme, is we kind of setting the plow a little deeper, if you will, and identifying additional risks throughout this process from the first initial implementation.
I'd add on to that a little bit. And so I think since BFM, was the first agency that went through this whole risk control matrix. And so it's been 8 years. So it's been 8 years, and we've learned a lot more with the help of Ally and everybody. And so I think just going through it another time, several years later, I think we're able to get a little bit more detailed and probably document some things that probably weren't documented previously. And so again, back to the continuous improvement, I think just since it's been 8 years since we had gone through and done a total refresh of this, I think is really what you're seeing. Next time, now that this gets into a habit of doing it annually, it should move a lot less into the future, I would expect. Go ahead, Heather.
Morgan, I have questions for both BHRA and BIT, and so you can address them together or you can address them separately, but I have the same concern with both. And if you look at BIT, where you started in Q4 fiscal year 25 with a 98.9% completion, then you went down to 95.2 in Q2 and 26. Then you went down to 91.1 in Q4 of 26. So completion numbers going down, it's not going up. That concerns me, number one. The second thing that concerns me is if I look at controls with repeat issues, I have the same number of controls with repeat issues this quarter as I did last quarter. And that seems very similar to what I'm seeing in BHRA. The numbers are a little different, but, it's been a long, long time, but as a former auditor, we know that things start tone at the top, right? Are we asking people, are we talking to them about getting things completed? What are we doing there? And as we just heard from the Auditor General, one of the things that they do as auditors is they go look at the findings that they've had and they say, have they addressed them? And it appears to me that from both a BIT perspective and a BHRA perspective, that we've not paid any attention to that. We had issues, we've got repeat findings, what are we doing about it? And so my question to you for both of those agencies is, what's happening at the top? Where's the tone setting? Like my staff will tell you, the entire Board of Regents system will tell you, we're on them about completing their attestations constantly. So talk to me about the tone at the top, and then talk to me about why are we seeing repeat issues?
So for tone at the top, I don't want to speak for either of those commissioners, but we do constantly, with Ally and Carly's help, there is the constant emails that go out, and so it isn't something that these individuals should be. There are calendar reminders that are put on people's calendars. There is constant communication. In terms of completion rate, I would probably say the goal would be to always have 100%. My dedication for the next cycle is to, maybe with Ally's help, hone in on who are those and why are they not those individuals that are not answering them. If we have certain people that maybe managers need to get involved in, or directors. In terms of repeat issues, both of these agencies implemented last year, and so I think now that we've seen that tone of which ones are those, really diving into it, which I noted for BIT really being the priority for this next cycle of, is it because of a given situation, because of the IT world, or is it because we just don't have the right documentation, or what's actually happening here? So I would say I would agree when I looked at the reports too, that is the same things that stood out to me as well. And I think we take that back to the drawing board and then we take next steps.
If I may, Mr. Chair, this is maybe preaching to the choir, but again, part of my duties with Board of Regents involves our IT infrastructure, and there's a lot of risk from a cybersecurity perspective, as well as just day-to-day risk, especially in the IT world. We are a state agency that is often targeted by bad actors, and so to see, again, probably harping on you, but 19 controls that are repeat issues, and we are going down in responses. I would just challenge you and the BIT team specifically to come back with 100% response rate and some real clear direction on the controls. And I would hope that those 19 repeat issues are not cybersecurity related.
Any other questions? All right, we got some work to do there.
All right, next up, we will have the Department of Revenue.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Morgan Dice. I serve as the Internal Control Officer for the Department of Revenue. For this attestation period, I am pleased to report a 100% on-time completion rate for all of our self-assessments across all of our 163 controls. Excuse me. We did have 2 risks with control issues within our lottery division this period. Both controls were newly developed during our annual risk and control matrix review and are not fully yet implemented. One involves the annual review of comprehensive SOPs for the division, and the other ensures that employee hardware, software, and training resources are assessed annually for adequacy. Both of these activities have historically been performed informally, and the division is on track to have a formal process fully implemented by October of this year. This year, the department completed a full review of the risk and control matrices for all 8 divisions. I conducted in-depth reviews with half of the divisions and more streamlined reviews with the others. Next year, I will alternate the level of review so each division receives a deeper assessment as part of establishing a strong baseline across the department. This approach allows me to spend meaningful time reviewing SOPs, gaining a clear understanding of division operations, and working closely with staff to ensure processes are well documented. Risks are accurately captured and controls are effectively designed. This should help to create a strong foundation for future reviews and testing activities. Once all divisions have received that initial comprehensive assessment, we will be able to move steadily into a maintenance cycle of annual reviews to address any changes that have occurred, may occur, or identify areas where changes should be made. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will stand by for any questions.
Do we have any questions for Department of Revenue? All right, thank you, Morgan.
Next up, we'll hear from the Department of Tribal Relations and Tourism.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Haley Willie. I serve as the Finance Officer and Administrative Director for the Department of Tourism. And in this role, I also support tribal relations with some of these duties. As outlined in the report, we have identified 124 risks across the various categories, with majority falling within operational. Most of these risks are assessed as low or medium, and I am pleased to report 100% completion rate for control owner self-assessments during this reporting period with no control failures. Last time we did their update was, or their annual review was in August of last year, so their annual review will be coming up here soon. That concludes the department's updates, and I'm happy to take any questions on theirs.
Do you have any questions? All right.
And then for tourism, as outlined in the report, we have identified 102 risks, with majority categorized as operational, with some under that public perception, compliance, and financial categories. Most of them are rated as low or medium, with a small number classified as high or critical. We achieved 100% completion rate for control owner self-assessments. However, we did have one failure within operational. This was due to switching our travelsouthdakota.com website over to a different host, and there was a brief outage. However, this should just be a one-time failure. I'd also like to report that we're still working with Ally on reviewing our RCM, and I look forward to reporting that in December. That is our updates for this quarter.
Okay, any questions for Department of Tourism? All right, thank you, Haley.
All right, next up, we'll hear from the Department of Corrections.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Emily Trujillo, Associate Director of Budget and Business Operations and Internal Control Officer for the Department of Corrections. This morning, I will be presenting DOC's quarterly report for Q4 of FY26. As of quarter 4, DOC has identified 513 total risks. This is an increase from 152 risks identified in quarter 2 of FY25. All DOC risk and control matrices were reviewed and updated in FY26. Our current risk totals by priority are 170 low, 234 medium, 66 high, and 43 critical. DOC achieved a 100% adaptation completion rate this quarter, with 34 control issues identified. DOC Clinical had 30 of those issues, 4 of which were reported failures due to staff misunderstanding the control verbiage. We are providing additional training so that they can better understand the attestation. Several compliance controls were also identified, and additional training will be provided, mostly to maintain consistent implementation across our facilities. The control activities that were related to operational failures will be reviewed with clinical leadership in FY27 to ensure that if those controls need to be updated to reflect our current practices. DOC Security had the additional 4 control failures during this review period. Policies and procedures are in place, and adjustments were made to our processes to prevent reoccurrence. Thank you. I can take any questions.
Questions? Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emily, I'm pretty sure you understood from my questions from BHRA and BIT that I have real concerns where repeat issues are concerned. And so I appreciate your comments that you're implementing some training, and I do know that in some instances it's a matter of people understanding what it is that they're attesting to. But can you just, from a general perspective, let us know where you think you're at for, maybe quarter 2 of fiscal year 27 repeat issues? Or do you think you're doing the work to get that number down?
I would say our biggest struggle in that area is staff turnover, especially running 24/7 facilities. It's a high turnover environment, and so we are working to adjust some of that onboarding process to get it included, and provide training each time that they come around. So we're certainly working to move it in that direction, but the turnover is always, I would say, the biggest issue.
Follow up, so just making sure that you've got appropriate documentation and training is the direction you're headed.
Yeah, and I hope that they will also be reduced just by some of them better learning what they're at, so we don't have the issue just because they didn't understand the question. Yeah.
Emily, how long have you been the internal control officer for DOC?
A little over a year.
A little over a year. Okay, so in that year, I'm sure there's kind of a learning curve that comes along with that role, right? And so I guess my question is as you've further down that learning curve, do you feel that Department of Corrections you know, with, you mentioned 24-hour staffing levels and all the facilities that comes along with it. I mean, inherently, there's, you know, a lot of risks there. Do you feel like DOC as a whole is, you know, takes this process seriously? Do you have any comments on that and what you've learned over the last year? And then the follow-up would be, have you done your annual review yet? Or are you looking forward to doing that here in the next, you know, 3 or 6 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So your first question, I would say that there's a really good tone at the top and buy-in for all different levels across DOC that you can see in that 100% attestation completion rate. They do take it very seriously and make sure that I do training with them. When I was new, all the owners did it, and now I kind of do more of people who've maybe come in and out of roles or refresher training, but those were really well attended also. So I would say that they take it very seriously. Also, in part of the huge, there's, I mean, a pretty significant increase in the number of risks that we've identified just while I've been there, because they wanted to really dig into that and improve it from, like what we were discussing earlier. They had them in place, but now, like, let's look at them again and learn from the other agencies. What types of risks did we not think of before that we can take a look at now, which in part is also our increase of control failures, because we have a lot more risks that we're looking at, but they are looking at them seriously rather than just checking the box. Well, and then can you remind me of your second question?
Yeah, I think it was just, I think you covered everything. And so, yeah, I just want to, it's good to hear that the tone at the top, because we can only do so much. But we want agency leadership buy-in to this process. We don't want it just to being, oh, we're checking this box and then we're going to move on with life. It's got to be a continuous improvement process that everybody takes seriously, because, you know, if we don't, you know, the consequences aren't good at the end of the day, right? And then we just don't want to put this on a shelf and dust it off every year or two. That's not the point of the whole process. So I'm glad to hear that there's good buy-in from the agency leadership within DOC.
And I would also add too, you know, we only have a 14-day window to complete these attestations, and a lot of like the security or clinical staff they don't have the luxury of us to be in front of a computer screen and just take those attestations. They're, you know, working the facilities, and so they have to kind of take that extra hurdle to make sure they get those attestations done. So that's even more impressive that they take that initiative.
Good point. Brenda, do you have a question?
Thank you for that. I think you answered it, Allie, and I think the trend data, I think, is important, right? You've gone, just when you look at, while the repeat issues, the last 2 quarters, right, remain at that 34 and 35, they seem to correlate with going from 17 controls to some correlation. Having said that, I just wanted to affirm, or my understanding, that when you talk about the clinical areas, this is the clinical treatment areas within the correction system, so the clinical programming side. Just was my other question. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the context of kind of where the issues are happening. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, next up we will have the School and Public Lands.
Good morning, board members, Committee Chairman Twilliger. My name is Justin Nagel. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Office of School and Public Lands. The Office of School and Public Lands completed our internal control attestations earlier this month, and I'm pleased to report that our office did not have any control failures in the last 6 months. Beginning in March this year, SPL's investment officer, Renee Knapp, and myself met several times with Deputy Director of Internal Controls, Carly Reinhardt, for the purpose of reviewing and revising SPL's risk control matrix. The SPL risk and controls matrix was originally set up during Ryan Bruner administration and hadn't been through a thorough review in 7 years. Over the next 2 months, in April and May, we were able to identify several areas in SPL's matrix that needed to be updated. In summary, the completed review process increased SPL's total risk count from 78 to 105, and our controls from 4 to 5. Overall, my assessment with the meetings we had working with internal controls with Allie and Carly was productive and time well spent. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Carly. That's all I have, so do I take any questions from y'all?
Any questions for School and Public Lands? All right, thank you, Justin.
All right, next we'll have the Office of the State Auditor.
Mr. Chair, may I address from here?
Yep, please do.
Good morning, Board, members of the audience. My name is Rich Satgas. I'm a state auditor for the state of South Dakota. And for the purpose of kind of giving an overview of the office, we have 3 main functions in the office. Those are accounting, auditing, and payroll. And those divisions collectively make up what the functions of the office do. During this last quarter, my office worked with Allie to reevaluate our internal controls, resulting in our risks increasing from 58 to 118, and our controls from 15 to 54. Looking closer at the metrics and starting with risk by type, you will note that of the 118 areas of risk, with 67% of them being operational and 33% being compliance driven, while 7 areas being technological and 4 areas being financial. In the metric risk by priority, you'll note that of the 118 types of risk, 22 being of high risk and 14 being critical. Under control owner self-assessment, you'll note that once again we completed all of our self-assessments on time with a rating of 100%. So with that, I'd be open for any questions.
Mr. Auditor, did you guys kind of go through your annual update? I'm just looking at Q2 to Q4, that, you know, the number of risks went from 58 to 118. I assume that you guys went through that annual process. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, we did, and along with that, I mean, we haven't had some of the issues that a lot of the other agencies have, so with the staff turnover and everything, so I think the departments have gotten a better handle of how all of this process works and have been thinking a lot about it. We've been really putting a top-down stress on looking at how we are dealing with the risks that we have within the office, and like was brought up previously, that we're learning from the other agencies what risks we can possibly be looking at and going forward.
Very good. Any other questions for the auditor? All right. Let's move
Next
on.
up, we'll hear from the Office of the State Treasurer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. My name is Mitch Krebs. I serve as the deputy for the Office of the State Treasurer. This is our office's 7th time reporting to the board and my first. As you know already, the State Treasurer's Office is primarily responsible for the essential function of receiving in funds, ensuring the general fund account is adequately funded, directing those funds to the correct agencies, overseeing vast amounts of unclaimed property, and ensuring that all money for the state of South Dakota is properly accounted for. We also work closely with the South Dakota Investment Council to ensure that excess funds are able to be invested in an appropriate manner to earn maximum interest on those dollars. Now, regarding the internal controls for the Office of the State Treasurer, continues to be partitioned into 2 divisions, Treasury Management Services and Unclaimed Property. In the past quarter, overall, the Office of the State Treasurer's risk count increased from 64 to 107, and controls went from 42 to 57. As you might expect, most of our risks were operational, compliance, or financially focused. Now, during the control owner's self-assessments, we had 100% completion in the attestation process and only 1 control failure this time, tied to a lack of onboarding procedures with an expected completion on that in August. And for some background on that, we have a new administrator at Unclaimed Property, and we've implemented background checks prior to hiring for all new employees, and that's going to extend to the Office of Treasury Management and the existing staff. So we're continuing to work with Allie and Carly to finalize and correct this 1 control failure and look forward to improving all of our processes overall in the future. Thank you for your time. I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you, Mitch. Any questions for State Treasurer? All right. Thank you.
Next up, we'll hear from the Department of Human Services.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Michael Helgerson. I'm the Internal Control Officer for the Department of Human Services. Today I'm presenting DHS's quarterly report for quarter 4 of fiscal year 2026. DHS currently has 430 documented risks. Of those, 78 are rated high or critical, which represents approximately 18.1% of DHS's total documented risks. This remains generally consistent with prior quarters and is slightly below the statewide average of 20%. I'm also pleased to report that DHS maintained 100% on-time completion rate for control owner self-assessments this quarter. I appreciate the continued responsiveness of our control owners and the division leadership. Their participation helps keep our internal control process timely, meaningful, and actionable. For Q4, DHS identified 3 high or critical risks with reported control issues. All 3 were compliance related and occurred within the South Dakota Developmental Center. The issues involved documentation standards, progress reporting, and a medication-related compliance matter. I worked with the division to review, clarify, and address each item. Corrective actions included staff follow-up, targeted retraining, updated action plans, and enhanced documentation review. For the medication-related citation, the South Dakota Department of Health confirmed that the facility is now in substantial compliance with all deficiencies corrected. As a result of the corrective actions taken, DHS has 0 past due remediation actions and 0 open control issues at quarter end. In summary, DHS continues to demonstrate strong participation in the internal control process with 100% on-time attestation completion, no overdue remediations, and no open control issues at quarter end. Moving forward, I will use the upcoming risk control matrix review to ensure our control descriptions continue to align with current operations. I will also focus on strengthening ownership, evidence expectations, and monitoring practices to help reduce the likelihood of repeat issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions for the Department of Human Services? Michael, how long have you been the internal control officer for DHS?
Little less than a year.
Talk to me about the learning curve that you've experienced in the less than a year.
It's like drinking from a fire hydrant.
When did you guys did you do your annual kind of update? It looks like your controls went from what, 386 to 428, so somewhere between the second and fourth quarter reporting. Were you involved with that process?
Yes, and Allie and Carly have helped spearhead the initiative. They've been instrumental with that with us. Yeah, it's been a fantastic process. We just finished up we just finished up the initial review about a month ago. And we're going to hop right in after this one, and we plan on doing it biannually.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for the work you've done. Follow up, Heather.
This is just a comment more than a question, but I appreciate, especially the fact that you've been on board for less than a year, just being very upfront with us at the end. We have taken care of everything. At the end of the quarter, we're in compliance. We have no outstanding issues, and I would just maybe set the bar in my mind for everybody that comes after. So I appreciate the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we'll hear from the Board of Regents, and Kayla Bosley is testifying remotely.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Kayla Bosley. I'm the Internal Systems Auditor for the South Dakota Board of Regents, and this morning I'm here to present SDBOR's attestation report for June 2026. The SDBOR system holds approximately 4,088 self-identified risk, which is 29% of the statewide total. You'll notice that came down with the addition of BIT and the governor's office. Of those 4,088 risk, we have 1,224 which are rated from high to critical. roughly 29% of our total risks, which is comparable with the state. Controls are documented for all 1,224 high to critical risks and have one or more attestation respondent on each. There are a total of 224 respondents that are spaced out across 9 locations and broken into divisions at each location. Our system has participated in 5 attestation periods thus far, and we have had 100% participation from all locations every single period since we have started this. BOR requires our respondents to complete attestations within 10 days instead of the 15 days that the state allows. We are just too big of an entity. We do not have the time to chase people close to the deadline. So we use those 5 days for possible technical issues and documentation of any reported control findings. Just the background. In the quarter 4 for FY26 attestation results, there were 17 total reported control failures. 7 of those instances were respondents that had answered the attestation incorrectly, which left a total of 10 control failures. 5 of the total of the 17 were repeat failures, but after conversation with our respondents, it was noted that 3 of those repeat failures were due to attestations that have more than one respondent who were not communicating effectively. There was no note of a failure within the last 6 months, so they were not actually repeat findings. The remaining 2 findings are related to a control that we have not implemented yet due to the delays with construction of a building that we need to set up that control. Originally, it was supposed to be done by June of 2026. Due to some construction and equipment delays, it has been pushed. Still plans to be done by the end of 2026, but those are only 2 repeat findings, so there is a plan there. Of the remaining findings, we had 1 misprint in promotional media. We had an instance of miscommunication between HR and a supervisor where additional training was provided. And we had 6 instances where there were brief technology lapses either within our software or a third-party software. Of those lapses, no breach or exploitation occurred. All instances of these control failures were reported to the owners and corrected in a very timely manner. As the BOR system reevaluates the RCMs and continue our participation in these attestation reports, we have noticed a very large growing understanding of internal controls and the importance of that these controls play within our system to better protect our institutions. The board will note continuous changes in our division's RCMs with each annual review as we aim to make our RCMs a living, breathing, truthful document that reflects consistency across our locations. That's really what I have, so I'll stand by if you have questions.
Questions for the Board of Regents?
Sorry, I shouldn't have a question since this is my agency, and it's not a question, it's more of a comment. I would also reiterate the fact that this entire process, the results and detailed information related to the failures and the attestations are reviewed with our audit committee, which is a subcommittee of our board. So kind of that tone at the top situation, just reiterating that this is something that our board is also interested in.
I have a question. In terms of your annual review of your risk control matrix, have you, did you do this last year? And, is there a certain time of the year you kind of planning on do this every year? How do you incorporate that kind of on an ongoing basis? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely. So the annual risk review is an enormous project for the South Dakota Board of Regents. We are 9 locations. Each location is then split into 9 divisions, and then each division has anywhere from 3 to 9 different people in each group. This being the first year of us doing a review and it hadn't been touched in 2 years, we have really been detailed going through it. I won't say that we've added a ton of risk. I know we've added risk. We've also kind of taken away some duplicate risk that we had maybe typed a few times in the same RCMs. Going forward from this, we we have had conversations with each division of what time of year works best for you, but our annual review is going to be a year-long process every year. It's just going to be splitting up the divisions and working with them that way. One thing that we did decide is we did put some of our institutions in groups to review their RCMs together so that they could ask each other questions and kind of bounce ideas back and forth. We found that to be very beneficial. We don't really, BOR doesn't really have a problem with buy-in. It's a standard in our system. So we have really great feedback from our participants. And this year we had a ton of turnover right here at the end of the year. So that's kind of shaken things up a little bit too with the RCMs. But going forward, it will be something that we are breaking out by division, and we are reviewing by division in the timeframes that fit them, because there are a lot of people to keep track of in this system.
And I'll just note too, you would expect to see this number change next time. We just haven't pushed those changes out to the system yet.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? All right.
All right, we'll hear from the Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Sarah Wellner, Internal Control Officer for the Department of Transportation. This morning I'll be presenting DOT's quarterly report for quarter 4 of FY26. We completed our second round of attestations this month with 100% completed by the June 15th deadline. During our first reporting period, we had 718 documented risk with 88 or 12.3% in the high and critical priority categories. After updates, we have 719 documented risks with 192 or 27% in the high and critical priority categories. We had 23 control failures this round, with 21 in the operational category, 1 in compliance and 1 in financial. 6 control failures were related to new software implementation, and there are backup controls in place, so the associated risks involved with those controls did not occur, even though it was a control failure. There were 2 repeat failures, and after review, one of them was a misunderstanding and should not have been a control failure and should not be during the next attestation period. The second repeat failure was included in the software implementation issues, so resolutions are being worked on. Thank you, and I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Department of Transportation? All right, thanks.
All right, next up we'll hear from the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Hope Fiesel, Internal Control Officer for GOED. Since our last reporting period, GOED has done some restructuring, so the risk and control matrix was updated to reflect those changes. We did not add any new risks or controls, so we still have a total of 305 risks identified, with roughly 17% of those being classified as high or critical. In order to input the changes into the ServiceNow platform where we do our attestations, some risks had to be removed and then re-added. This is what caused the quarter 2 numbers to change around from, so it says 142, but we did have 305 last quarter. We had a 100% on-time completion of our attestations with 1 control failure. The control failure was just due to it not being implemented at the time of reporting, but that should be implemented within the next couple of weeks. So no concerns there. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Any questions for GOED? All right, thank you.
All right, next we'll hear from the Attorney General's Office.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Internal Control Board. I'm Kelsey Roth, Director of Budget and Finance with the Attorney General's Office. I'm here to present our quarterly internal control report. The Attorney General's office has 315 documented risks, of which 21% are classified as high to critical. To address those risks, we have 68 documented controls in place. This reporting period, we achieved 100% completion rate and identified 3 control issues. 2 of the 3 controls are currently in the process of being implemented. So one involves the development and implementation of new training courses, which requires some additional lead time, and the other involves continuing configuration of a new technology system. So then the third was a technology failure in which an internal document routing system did not complete a required process step. There was no impact to the services that were provided, and that issue has been addressed and resolved, and the system is now functioning properly. So that concludes our update, and I'll stand by for questions.
Any questions for the Attorney General's office? When you went through this, when were you part of this when Attorney General's office was onboarded through this process?
Yes.
About how long ago was that? Just in fiscal year 26?
Yes, this is our second reporting period, so
Okay.
about a year.
So do you have any comments a year into this? What's been the feedback, given that, you know, your constitutional office outside the executive branch? Tell me about the buy-in, if you will, at the Attorney General's office.
Yes, so it's interesting because just in day-to-day conversations, internal controls come up a lot more since we've gone through this process, and even looking at, well, how does this process need to change? And so when it comes time to reviewing, I think that we will have more. It's just getting that mindset, and now people in the Attorney General's office are really thinking about other processes that maybe they didn't think about when we first went through this. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last will be the governor's office. This is John's first time reporting, so feel free to grill him.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. My name is John Katilnik. I'm the Deputy General Counsel for the Governor's Office and apparently the newly minted Internal Controls Officer as well. So during the presentation, I'll just kind of cover 3 broad categories: background, results, and kind of our takeaways as we went through this process. So starting with the background, our office completed implementation of internal controls early this spring. I obviously like to give a special thanks to Allie and her team for her guidance and assistance through the process. During our risk assessment, we divided our office into 4 functional areas. We looked at the General Counsel's office, communications, operations and support, and policy. And we split into those working groups, and those individual working groups met with Allie several times over the course of several months to come up with the controls that we have. Compared to many other agencies that have completed this process, we are a relatively small office, and I think that worked to our advantage because nearly every employee participated in the respective risk assessment team, resulting in broader input, greater collaboration, and overall just stronger staff buy-in. Moving on to the results, the Governor's Office identified 202 documented risks, with approximately 22% classified as high or critical, which is consistent with the state average of approximately 20%. Based on that, we came up with 43 implemented controls, documented controls. And as of this quarter, we had 100% of our assessors submitted their control attestations on time, and we experienced no control failures during this cycle. Some takeaways. I've been through this process with a couple other agencies. First with GFP, I went through entirely with them, and a little bit with Board of Regents, and then now with the Governor's Office. Each time I found the process to be more streamlined, more productive, more thorough. Allie and her team continue to refine the process, allowing agencies to take a deeper and more meaningful look at their operations. Internal controls are a significant undertaking, especially when you're starting from scratch. But it is an invaluable exercise. It confirms where strong controls already exist while identifying opportunities to strengthen processes, improve efficiency, and reduce risk. The governor's office already had many documented policies and procedures in place, but going through this exercise helped us identify areas where we could eliminate unnecessary redundancies and strengthen existing controls. And again, I'd like to thank Allie and her team for walking us through this process and getting us to where we're at. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John in the governor's office? Anything that you learned that was just, or as you went through the process, I guess, this last spring, were there any, did employees generally buy into the process, I guess? And then were there any light bulbs that went on like, hey, I never thought about, looking at it this way in terms of identifying certain risks?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Going through the process, I reiterate that all of our employees were engaged, everything all the way down to our frontline staff in identifying certain risks. So I believe that helped a lot with the buy-in, because they're the ones that on the front line saying, hey, this is what is a potential risk, or, giving a caller bad information or something like that. So that was really invaluable to have that deep down level of buy-in. Overall, the process, as far as light bulbs, again, I defer to Allie and her team as far as going through different agencies and having recurring issues that, aren't just specific to one agency. So I think that was also very beneficial to be kind of towards the bottom of the list of completing this process, is that we benefited from other agencies' hard work in identifying some of these risks. But it was a great process. A lot of the things we had controls for already, but maybe not as documented as thorough as we should. So again, great process, and I think it's an invaluable tool for the state.
Brenda.
I actually don't have a question. It's more about the report itself. So I'll wait and see if anybody else has any questions for John, and then if not,
Okay, anybody else has any questions? All right, thank you.
All right. So my wonder is really, as we've gone through the iterations of the reports and had a number of reporting cycles, I think the report itself very, very helpful in us examining, within individual line items and categories of what's happening. There's been questions today about some of the trends, right? And I think those are everything that's being reported, I think, is appropriate and very helpful. A wonder I have, though, is if there wouldn't be some value add in putting some of the control with repeat issues as well as the risks in context of a percent of the total number of risks or the total number of controls, if that makes sense, right? If you've got 20 repeat control issues, and I'm making up a number, you've got 40 total controls versus 20 repeat issues of 4,000, that's a different, right? That kind of weights the data a little bit. So I think one thing I'd encourage us to think about is then how to maybe, in addition to this information, think about ways to weight some of the data that would help us get less of a raw number, very important, but put that raw number in context as a percent of the total risks or the total controls.
Thanks, Brenda. That's great feedback. I think, now that we've had everybody onboarded, I think it's a good time for us to take a look at our metrics report. And then, as you'll hear shortly here, we're going to be moving to phase 2 where we test controls. And so this report will be evolving to address those metrics too. So changes to come.
Thanks, John. Okay, I believe that concludes item number 6 on the state internal control quarterly report. We'll move on to number 7, the framework project update. I'll turn it over to Allie.
Yes. All right, so as you've heard, this past quarter, we finalized implementation of the statewide internal control framework with the Gov's office, and we are nearing completion with the Secretary of State's office, just kind of letting them get through all these election cycles, and then we will finalize that, and I expect them to attest in the September cycle. So once that work is complete with that team, implementation will be complete across all executive branch agencies. We've also seen continued interest from entities not technically required to participate in this program. And so just last week, we met with the Investment Council's leadership team. They expressed interest in adopting our internal control framework, and we expect to begin onboarding with them in the coming weeks. At the same time, we're wrapping up the first annual risk and control matrix review cycle. And so this is the first year of that requirement that's been put into statute. It has been a very significant lift. You guys have seen the numbers changing in the amount of time that Carly and I put into that, but agencies have done really well with that process. Nearly 94% of reviews are complete, and I anticipate in the next couple of weeks, all of those numbers will be finalized, and you guys will see that in next time's report. Any questions on the project update?
Ally, can you remind me, so with Investment Council coming on and then you're finishing up the Secretary of State, does that essentially completes all departments across the board in terms of getting through the internal control process? Is that correct?
All of those statutorily required to participate, and then you'll see in this slide here, I just have all of those listed who have opted into the program or who are required to, and then you'll see like the SDRS, the UJS, and then soon the Investment Council will be, not statutorily required, but they are opting into the process just because of the amount of overlap they have with all of the executive branch teams.
Very good. First of all, I want to thank you and Carly for all the work that you've done over the last year. I know you kind of took on a Herculean task, if you will, because I think over the last year, a ton of effort has gone into getting to where we're at today. And I appreciate everything that you've done. And I know a lot of agencies have reached out asking for help with updating risk control matrix now that it's kind of an annual required update in statute. And so, I think, the amount of work and where we've gone over the last year, I think it's just a testament to your efforts and expertise, and I appreciate that, because I think really where we're at today, as soon as, Secretary of State gets finished up, it's been an effort over the last since the board was created in 2016, to be honest with you.
Yep.
So it's been a decades-long effort to kind of get to where we're at today. And then I think that kind of transitions into, next phases and XYZ. So thank you so much. Okay. I'll let you continue.
Sure, yes. So
keep
next we'll
going.
move on to the FY27 work plan. So again, by statute, we are required to have you as the board members approve our work plan for the coming fiscal year. And so this work plan closely follows the structure of the plan that you guys approved the last several years. Each quarter, our meeting agendas remain very consistent. We review any subrecipient audit findings that DLA sends our way. We review the single audit findings with DLA, and then hear from GOAC updates, as well as the quarterly internal control reports and any upcoming agency framework implementations or reviews. So following the issuance of the single audit in March, we will continue to have legislative audit come and brief your team on where we stand as a state for that. And in addition, now that agencies are statutorily required to review their RCM risk assessments annually, we've provided each agency with their respective documents to do that effort and for us to review the risk and control matrices. So this will allow them to plan for and complete those reviews by this time next year. Once those documents are reviewed and updated to reflect the most current and complete controls, we will begin controls testing, which I'll tell you about a little bit shortly. We'll be kind of completing that phase around this time next year as well. You'll also see we have our ongoing activities listed on the bottom as well. With that, unless there's any questions, I would ask for a motion to approve our FY27 work plan.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal year 2027 work plan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, the fiscal year 2027 work plan has been approved. All right, let's move on to 7C, the internal control testing methodology.
Yeah, so kind of the last section today, as you've heard all morning, as we wrap up the initial implementations and we have that first year of the annual RCM reviews under our belt, we're sitting with, a very good updated risk pool and updated controls to work with. And so it's time to move to what I've been calling phase 2 of our process, which will be controls testing. So Carly and I felt it was important to establish a methodology that will provide a more standardized approach for how we test all of the controls. And so it'll provide consistency in how we select controls, how we test them, how they're documented, evaluated, and ultimately reported to you guys. So this will help determine whether controls are both appropriately designed and then if they're actually operating as they're supposed to. So one of the keys to a successful internal control program is clearly defining who is responsible for each part of the testing process. And so you'll see here we've called out the roles and responsibilities. We have our statewide internal control office, we have several agency internal control officers, the control owners, the control performers, and then the management and oversight and you guys as the board. And so each role has different responsibilities. No single group can make the testing successful on its own. It really ensures that we're fulfilling responsibilities and communicating effectively. And the result here will be a stronger internal control environment that better protects our public resources and supports the achievement of our agency objectives. So once we've identified the controls within an agency, the next step is kind of determining which controls that we are going to test. And so rather than selecting controls at random, we're going to use a more structured, risk-based approach to prioritize controls that present maybe the greatest potential impact to that agency or to the state. And so you'll see that we have these 7 criteria here, and these are going to help ensure that our testing efforts are focused where they're going to provide the greatest value to the state. So no single one of these criteria determines whether a control will be selected, but together it gives us a more comprehensive picture of our risk. So for example, we might look at controls involving significant financial or operational impact, maybe some that have a high transaction volume. We could consider staff turnover or instability or maybe a loss of institutional knowledge. As we heard from legislative audit, past performance is one of the best indicators of future risk. And so we're especially going to be focused on areas that maybe have a history of errors, deficiencies, control, audit failures, or potential frauds. So using these criteria allows us to prioritize testing based on risk rather than treating every control the same. So this will ensure our testing resources are focused on controls, again, having the greatest impact on financial reporting, compliance, operations, or just safeguarding our public resources. Once controls are selected, testing procedures are tailored based on the nature, frequency, and risk of each control. And so there's no one-size-fits approach for this process. But this methodology ensures that testing is applied consistently while remaining flexible enough to address those unique risks of each agency. And so in summary, this methodology provides a consistent risk-based approach to evaluating internal controls across our state government. So as implementation transitions to ongoing oversight, this is going to help ensure we're focusing on our resources of areas of the greater risk, and making sure we provide reasonable assurance that key controls are designed appropriately and that they're operating effectively. Carly and I will plan to use this during our initial or pilot period during the next few months, and then during our September board meeting, we'll present any changes that we might propose for this methodology, and then, if any are needed, and then we'll plan to adopt this into our board documents at the September meeting. With that, I'd ask for any questions on this methodology or comments.
Does anybody have any questions for Ally on the internal control testing methodology that she presented? Go ahead, Heather.
Not surprising, I have a question. So Ally, can you maybe compare, contrast how your methodology is the same or different from the types of testing that would be done by our auditors? So are you using the same types of framework, methodology? They have certain things they have to follow. Is yours going to be following that same type of framework, or are you going to be different? And if different, how?
I would say very similar approach, and especially since my deputy comes from legislative audit, we're going to be leveraging that experience to kind of get on the same playing field or just kind of do things consistently, so then when legislative audit comes in, hopefully we're better preparing those state agencies to have everything in place for that.
Brenda?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment, and really want to thank you for putting this together. This is an area that we've talked about just while we have lots of federal partners that examine our work. We have legislative audit that examines our work. We have an internal control office and officers who are phenomenal. Multiple eyes, multiple views, and a structured way to approach this, I think is going to be very, very impactful. And again, I would just welcome, we welcome this. You know, I think this is sometimes when you talk about different audits or different tests, people, you know, get a little, you know, and I just appreciate that, you know, this is just an opportunity for us to continue to verify, right? And where we maybe find that we've got issues, we can address those. And so it's in that continuous improvement. So I really thank you and your team for putting this structured approach together.
Well said. I agree. Okay. Anything further on agenda item number 7? Okay. Next agenda item, any other discussion items to come before the board at the current time? Okay. Number 9, agenda items for next meeting. Does anybody have any agenda items for next meeting they would? I have something that's been on my mind. Allie, do you have, or maybe you can report back at next meeting, I often wonder, how are we as an internal control board and our internal control process that we've worked on for a number of years, how do we compare to, and can we compare to other states? Are we ahead of the curve? Are we behind the curve? I don't know how we would find this out, but it's something that's I've thought about in my mind. And so I don't know if you or our consultant have any contacts with other states to, you know, help us answer that question, but that's something that I've thought about, and I don't know if you have any comments of anything that you've looked at.
Just a few. I would say that's something that I've always been curious about too, and I've done a little bit of looking. You know, we've actually had a couple of states reach out to us. They've found our documents on the websites and kind of just asked how we're doing this, and I just kind of coach them through our trainings and what we do for them. So in that case, I would say in some aspects, we're probably a little bit ahead of the curve and being more preventive and have a structured process. But I guess I would like to do a little more looking to see what other states are doing to see if we can do anything better.
Yeah, I think if you had a little bit of time to try and do a little research on that, that might be helpful. My sense is, you know, this effort that we have in South Dakota that's been established over a number of years is probably more centralized than other states have. I would guess us being a little on the smaller end of the spectrum allow us to be a little bit more nimble, if you will, in setting things up. And so I'd be interested in what you find out. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to any public comment. Anybody here for public comments? Is anybody online? Okay. One last, before we adjourn, just again, a thank you to Allie, Carly, and the team for all the effort. Thank you to Chris Peterson, outgoing board member. If you see Chris around, I'll make sure that I reach out to him and thank him for the service on the board. We look forward, I'd expect we'll have that vacant board position filled by our next meeting. With that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
To in-depth documentaries. SDPB sparks curiosity and lifelong learning in every South Dakotan. SDPB. Good, useful, and full of wonder.